So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee, which will be considering an application for the premises licence for the Bunker Cafe. The procedure for today's hearing can be found on page 3 of the agenda. In order to assist in the process this evening, I must ask everyone to ensure that mobile phones are either switched off or on silent mode. We would be grateful if you would remain quiet whilst the meeting is in progress. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be filmed by the Council and broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the chamber, it is possible that the cameras will capture your image. By your presence, you are deemed to consent to be filmed and for the use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The chairman of the meeting can, at their discretion, terminate or suspend filming if, in the opinion, continuing to do so would prejudice the proceedings of the meeting, or if they consider the continued filming might infringe the rights of any individual or breach any statutory provision. Finally, there are no planned fire drills for this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately via the emergency exits. There's one over there and where you came in. The first item on the agenda we now take is to elect a chairman for the meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. Do I have any proposals?
Is that seconded?
That's seconded by me. I therefore pronounce you chairman of the subcommittee meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Newell.
We'll just swap seats. That's right. Swap names.
I'll get the jacket.
Yeah, no. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, that was painless, but it has to be done. Thank you very much. Are there any apologies for absence? Item 2 on the agenda?
No apologies, Chairman.
Are there any declarations of interest? Then we go to item 4 on the agenda and I ask the officer if he would like to take his case. Where is Sean?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as you heard earlier, the procedure of the hearing is set out in the front of the report there, and I can also say there's been no withdrawals of representations that have been made.
Thank you. Right. Would you like to give us the facts of the case now, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Again, as you've heard, this is an application for a new premises licence at 7 Milo Drive. The application is at page 13 in the report. I won't go into the details in the report as I know Mr Day is likely to go through it in more detail, so I don't propose to duplicate what he is going to say. All I would say is to remind members that you must base all of your decisions on the evidence that's put before you, and it has to be related to one of the 4 licensing objectives. You must also have regard to the statement of licensing policy and the statutory guidance in reaching your decision. The Licensing Act dictates a presumption of issue, but balanced against that are the powers of review, which can be exercised by any person where one of the licensing objectives is threatened. If members feel it would be appropriate to attach conditions to protect one of the licensing objectives, then obviously you may do so. If, however, you consider that conditions would not protect any of the licensing objectives, then you can refuse the application. Whatever decision you reach, you must give full reasons for your decision, and those will be recorded. So unless there was anything else that I can help with at this stage, I wasn't proposing to say any more.
Thank you, John. Any questions of the officer? Councillor Spittle, as the ward councillor for the area, I understand you might want to say something. Hang on a minute, sir. I understand Fred came in late. He wants to ask a question.
I did tell you.
Yeah, sorry, mate.
Paul, could you tell me whether you did request a report from the police?
Yeah, the police would have been consulted as a responsible authority and would have been made aware of the application.
That's not what I asked. I said, did you send it to the police?
It would have been sent to the police, yes. It was submitted electronically. Then we forward it on to the police, so they would have been aware of the application, yes.
It was just there was no evidence of their reply, so I just wanted to see the evidence of their reply.
Thanks for that, councillor. Councillor Spittle, want to come in now?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make sure that everyone can hear me. Now, as members and most of the public here tonight know, I'm one of the ward councillors and have lived in our present house 41 years within walking distance of the parade of shops where this application sits. In addition, I have been heavily involved with the St Catherine's Hill Community Hall since it was built in 2001 on the former site of the Catherine Wheel Public House, frequently referred to by the residents in their communications. There is a lot of interest and probable support in this new venture on the site of the former hairdressers without even seeing their proposed menus. There is no licensed eatery nearby, the nearest being either the Railway Hotel on the corner of Stour Road and Bargates, the Avon Causeway far beyond the other side of St Catherine's Hill and Town Common, or the Stour Vale in Barrack Road. Having seen the proposed fare, which we've now got in the supplementary information, it looks to me it will be an attractive and welcoming place suitable for the area, and I congratulate the applicants on their research and homework in preparing their application. I'm also grateful to Mr. Day for his interpretation of the comments that have been sent in, and no doubt he will elaborate further later in the meeting. Referring to the objections, which I trust you have all read, firstly, can I just confirm I've had no further objections. The only contacts I've had are those who have already submitted their objections. As you will have observed, there are a number of elderly people that live in the area, including the block of flats and cottages next to the community hall. I feel in this case, fear of crime and antisocial behaviour is behind the complaints and objections here, and I ask the committee to take this into account when deciding on any conditions they may feel should be appropriate. A number of the incidents quoted happened a long time ago. Despite careful vetting, the one at the hall, resulting in the laundrette's window being broken, was a party for a 14-year-old girl that, unknown to her and her parents, was promoted extensively on social media, and the numbers attending got out of hand. Incidentally, the cost of the repair to the window in the laundrette was met by the trustees of the hall. The Catherine Wheel pub, once determined for closure and demolition, did become run down and attracted the wrong clientele. But up till then it had been a well-run public house with, if I recall correctly, few incidents. But always one or two can remain in people's memories for a long time. In view of these regrettable incidents, neighbours, including myself and family, will naturally keep a very close lookout for any untoward activity. But I look to the committee to consider where possible these could be prevented or controlled. For example, noise from inside and should drinking be allowed outside, insistence that food is served with alcohol, sensible hours. I believe the applicants do not intend to serve alcohol in the mornings unless there is a function. The functions, which would possibly include hen parties in the morning, I trust will not be allowed to become too boisterous and noisy. Should the business change hands, will the licence continue to be attached to the property? In that case, can the committee be assured the business will continue without problems following a change of ownership? Should there be complaints about the behaviour of the clientele, will this establishment be dealt with swiftly? As Mr. Chairman, residents have raised concerns with me, which I have briefly listed above, but please do not hesitate to ask me any questions about the area. As you know, I am very well acquainted with it. And that really is all I have to say. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor. Any members of the committee want to ask? Yeah. Councillor Nutt?
I wonder if I could ask through you, Chairman, the local councillor, in respect of the NICER operation, they sell alcohol. Have there been any incidents associated with the sale of that alcohol?
No, not that I'm aware. And in fact, I did speak to the owner of NICER, and they pointed out that their licence, similar to what is being asked for here, does go until I think at 11:30, but the shop closes at 9 o'clock. And also bearing in mind the sheer range of alcohol bought in that area, there have, to my knowledge, not been any incidents through alcohol being bought by them. Thank you.
So the concerns that have been expressed are not experienced by the current seller of alcohol in that area?
No,
Thank you.
not as far as I'm aware.
Councillor Neal?
It's a question to Councillor Spittle, actually. I'm reading the letter from Jumpers and St Catherine's Hill Residents Association, and they do refer to the fact that there is a similar operation which you tended to overlook, so by saying it was as far as down as Bargates, but there's a similar operation on St Catherine's Parade in Fairmont.
No, this is not similar because, as I'm aware, Mum's Pantry, I think it's Mum's, yeah, is not licensed.
What was put in the Residents Association letter?
Are we happy then?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go to Philip Day. But Mr. Day, can I ask, are you going to speak on behalf of both of your clients, or are they going to speak as well?
I'll speak on behalf of both of them, if I may.
Thank you. Far away, please.
Then if I can introduce myself, my name is Philip Day. I'm a solicitor with Lacey's in Bournemouth, and I've been instructed to advise and to act on this application, which I drafted and submitted on behalf of the applicants. There are two joint applicants, Mrs. Kate Green, who sits immediately to my left, and Mrs. Amanda Eames, who unfortunately had a pre-booked holiday in Greece, and if the technology is working, will hopefully be observing proceedings from several hundred miles away via the YouTube connection, but only time will tell whether that worked. Can I just deal with one matter immediately, and that's with regard to the police. My practice with regard to any application of any significance, i.e. a new licence, a full variation application, anything like that, then provided time allows, which it does most of the time, I draft up the paperwork, agree it with my clients, and then I go through an informal consultation process. I look at it and think, well, who's going to be interested in this? Almost inevitably, it's going to be the police, it's going to be environmental health, and there may be others depending on the specific factors. In this case, I did send a copy of the draft application to the police with copies of the conditions. We had an email exchange with regard to the conditions, which we took on board, or I took on board in drafting, and that ended up on the 16th of May with an email coming in to me from a lady called Louise Busfield, who is a relatively new civilian licensing officer covering Christchurch, East Dorset, and also the East Bournemouth area. And she simply said, further to my previous email, I can confirm that I have no representations in regard to this application. The same was the response from everybody else that we consulted, although it's fair to say that not everybody responded at that stage. And you have formal responses in your paperwork from the fire officer and the planning officer. I did say in my written representation that I would update you with regard to planning. A colleague of mine, David Bevan from HLF Planning Limited, is dealing with the planning application. He telephoned the planning officer this afternoon. He, I'm told, had been advised by the environmental health officer that they were now satisfied, had no concerns. There's usually issues on planning with regard to extraction and that sort of thing. But given the nature of the operation here and the nature of the cooking in particular, he was perfectly happy. But and I'll be absolutely straight with you, he was waiting for the outcome of this meeting this evening, and had noted that Councillor Spittle was going to be here, and wanted to see what the outcome of that was before making a decision either under delegated authority or it going to committee. The two overlap, but they are, of course, completely separate. With regard to the application itself, you can read, dare I put it like that. We've applied for, at this stage, slightly longer hours than we would ideally like to have in terms of actually operating. In terms of opening, certainly, yes, we'd like to open reasonably early in the morning because at the end of the day, it is intended that this is going to be a cafe. And people like to use cafes to have breakfast, cup of tea, cup of coffee in the morning, and the like. We do not anticipate that there would be much, if any, demand for alcohol at that time of the morning. I'm quite sure where the idea of having hen parties or stag parties in a cafe come about. I would have thought the old Christchurch Road in Bournemouth or Ibiza would probably be more appropriate for parties. But there it is. In terms of the evening, it's not a matter that you can take into account, but realistically, in this location, bearing in mind that there is nothing like this in the near locality, it is going to be demand-led. Once they open the doors and see what customers they have at what time of day, they won't know. But certainly in the first instance, the plan is to open until about 9 o'clock on weekdays, closing earlier on Sundays, and that's reflected in the application, but possibly remaining open until 11 o'clock at night if demand warrants it. And one of the things that they would like to do in the future is to do things like a wine tasting event or something like that, which is one of the reasons why we didn't want this to be a full restaurant license, with the idea that you can only have a drink if you're sitting down and having a table meal with a knife and fork. That's not the intention. You know, you walked around the site earlier. There is, for example, a laundrette at the sort of top end of that arcade. One can imagine somebody coming in and putting on a load of washing, and rather than sitting there or going home and then coming back, there's a cafe there. I'll pop into the cafe, I'll have a nibble, I'll have a coffee, or maybe even a glass of wine. There is absolutely no intention, as far as the alcohol side of it is concerned, to even begin to think about competing with the supermarket, with Nissa. It's just not going to work. Their pricing is going to be significantly different, more expensive, obviously, than that off license. But they would want the facility with some of the speciality wines that they look to have, that if somebody wants to take a bottle of that home with them, then they should be free and able to do so. I see that we have, I think it's 7 members of the public who have taken the time and trouble to come along tonight, as well as, of course, Councillor Spittle. Dare I say this, looking at these good people, they're our target audience. They're our customers. They're the people that we would like to want to come in and have a cup of coffee. If they want a glass of wine, then fine, you can have a glass of wine. It's intended to be a facility very much for the local area and the local community. And the last thing that Mrs. Eames and Mrs. Green want to do is to upset their neighbours, whom they will be looking at and for the the prosperity of this business. I've provided you with a written representation, which I know you will have taken the time and trouble to read, and you've got various photographs, sample menus, mood boards, and all of that to go with it. Frankly, I'm not going to insult you by taking you through that line by line or whatever. We entirely accept that the concerns that local residents have are genuinely held. That goes without saying, and we respect that. But you've already asked a number of pertinent questions. The fact of the matter is that you have to make a decision that's evidence-based, and there is no evidence that there is going to be a problem. And as you've already been advised by Mr. Whitney, if there is a problem of any description, then anybody can institute a review. It doesn't have to be Mr. Whitney and his team. Councillors can do it, individual members of the public can do it. There's a relatively simple form to fill in. There's no fee to pay, and you can do it at any time. And that is the safeguard that the Licensing Act provides, being the other side of the freedoms that it gives. I'm sure you remember when it was being promoted by the then government, they were talking about 24-hour cafe culture. Well, we're not pushing it quite that far. I just want to end by dealing with a couple of a number of points that were raised by Councillor Whittle in particular when she addressed you. She invited you to consider an insistence that food should be sold with alcohol. I've already explained to you why it is that we don't want a full restaurant licence. If you do something like that, then you get into difficulties. I have to serve food with alcohol. Well, technically, if you look at the relevant legislation, alcohol is food. Beer is covered by food safety legislation, as is wine. Would a bag of crisps be okay? Would half a panini be okay? Where do you draw the line? The fact of the matter is that we've written this on the basis that the starting point is that substantial food in the form of table meals all day and into the evening, and then proper food but snacks later on into the day. You cannot change this into a pub, because that condition would be on the licence, because we've offered it. It's there, and any grant you have to make consistent with the operating schedule and whatever else you might then choose to do. If the business changes hands, the business changes hands. As I'm sure you're aware, the licence lasts forever, and it is a relatively simple thing to transfer the licence from one operator to another, and it happens all the time. But again, the safeguard that you've got is this entire business about review and so on and so forth. And if there are complaints, they will be dealt with swiftly, because they'll be dealt with swiftly by these two ladies. They have experience, in particular Mr. Green, who is sitting next to his wife, has for a number of years operated premises called Cafe Riva, which is on South Overcliff Drive, on this side of Bournemouth. You may or may not know it. it is a not dissimilar sort of operation that they have there. They never have any trouble there. So they are, as a couple, very experienced in doing this sort of thing. And if there is an issue, then dealing with it immediately and making sure it doesn't happen, because fundamentally, the last people they want to upset are the neighbours and the local residents, because, as I've said before, they are looking to them to make this business a success by being customers who are welcome there and who want to go there because there is nothing else in the locality. Now, I haven't covered absolutely everything that I put in my outline response to the representations. I don't propose to repeat what you've already read. If you have any questions of me or of Mrs. Eames, then we are here to assist you by hopefully providing you with answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Before we go into questions, can I ask Councillor Spittle if she wants to summarise on any matters that she's discussed?
Not really, although I'm still slightly concerned about what Mr. Day said about the food being served in the evenings.
Well, that might be a question which will
That would
come
probably
in a
be a
minute.
question that I
So.
would like to ask, yeah. But otherwise, I think it's all been said.
Thank you, Councillor Spittle. Mr. Day, any summary from you before we ask questions?
Only that I'm grateful for Councillor Spittle for being quite frank and telling us that there is a lot of support for this. And again, by emphasising and underlining the point that there have been no issues in this locality or at similar places.
Thank you. Members, any questions, please? Councillor Neil?
Yes, Mr. Day, we've just been given the plan this evening of the layout. There's nowhere highlighted where the alcohol is being served from. Could you or anybody enlighten us to where is it going to be behind the bar, or is it going to be easy access for all and sundry?
No, all of it will be behind where it says cafe serving area. The intention is that there'll be shelves and so on there, and it will be kept there. You will not be able to go in, as you can do with the supermarket, and pick up a can or a bottle and walk out with it. You would have to be served with it from behind the counter.
Councillor Nottage, anything?
Yes. Is the applicant aware of Christchurch Pub Watch?
Yes.
And you'd be happy to join in with that principle?
Yes.
Any further questions, members?
Sorry, ask some questions.
Yeah, no.
Thanks, Councillor.
Sorry.
Thank you,
Legal
Chair.
beaver.
Through you, just some points of clarification, Mr. Day, I think to help the members. To do with page 16 of the agenda, personal licence number, if known, to be advised, application in the process of being made on the application form.
Yes. That is the case, and I in fact received an email this morning from Steve Ricketts, and I sent him a copy of this, which is the personal licence that was issued to Mrs. Green by Bournemouth Borough Council, because she lives within Bournemouth Borough Council's area, and that was issued on the 26th of June 2018. And for what it's worth, its number is BH163990. You're more than welcome to a copy of it.
Thank you, Mr. Day. It's just a point. Obviously, the premises licence can be granted subject to the condition that there should be a DPS. Obviously, a DPS needs to be a personal licence holder. There you go, councillors. There's some comfort that there is a personal licence holder already in place. It's just an update on the application form, so you can see that obviously that the licence is being held in that regard. Whilst we're there as well, Mr. Day, on page 16, at the very top, will the supply of alcohol be for consumption on the premises, off the premises, or both? Whereas in your representation supplementary information, So the box both is ticked, but your supplementary information, as it were, at page 4 or 2 of 5 of that, as a licence would only apply to the building itself, whilst people would be free to take food and non-alcoholic beverages outside, they would not be able to take a glass of wine unless off-sales were included on the licence. Is it not your client's case that they would like off-sales? Yeah.
Sorry, the reason for that was that if you look back at some of the representations, some of them are suggesting that the licence should be on sales only, so that no alcohol should be sold for consumption off the premises. And what I was saying there was subject to getting the appropriate consents, which is by no means a given, that if they were at some point in the future allowed to let people outside, then there wouldn't be any restriction on somebody walking out with a plate of sandwiches or meal or whatever and a coffee or a soft drink. But unless the licence also allowed off sales, they wouldn't be able to take a drink outside and sit in the sunshine sipping that. But equally, and the other side of that coin is that if they do their wine tastings and somebody wants to buy a bottle of the wine that they've just tasted to take it home, then again, they would not be able to do that unless off sales were included on the licence, which is why we've asked for on and off sales.
Sorry to intervene, Chair. Hopefully those questions obviously help you in your determination. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Day.
Thank you. I've just got one question actually. Where do you intend storing your alcohol on the premises? I can't see any storage area as such on the plan.
The alcohol will be stored on the shelves and so on behind the counter area. This is not intended to be a pub, so it doesn't have a beer cellar with a dozen barrels of Heineken or whatever it is, because that's not the nature of the operation. So what limited stock will be held will be on the shelves behind the counter.
Thank you. Anything further, members? Right, thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Can I first thank Councillor Spittle for her input, and I'd also like to thank those local residents who took time out to attend this meeting tonight. Having considered all representations in writing and from applicant solicitors, we've concluded that the licensing objectives would not be compromised, and therefore we agree to grant as applied for. Thank you very much.